take inventory of your life and ask yourself, where am I playing the victim? And to really, truly let that go in every area. Because wherever you're the victim, you don't have any power. And so you can only take your power back when you realize the power you have in this moment to create a new way of seeing what happened in the past. And when you get your energy out of the past and you don't get too caught in the future of different timelines, that's why I say you feel the feeling, but then you come back to the present moment, because it isn't about the specifics, because that same intelligence can organize something probably way better than you can imagine. So bring yourself here with all that energy, then you actually have enough energy to create. Then you're not feeling lethargic. Then you're not feeling like distracting yourself, because all aspects of you are on the same page. That's the quest. Get all aspects of you on the same page. Do that by getting out of victim mentality, understanding these spiritual truths, and like I said, commit to something and watch what happens.
Nick Zei, welcome on Just Tap In, brother. What are you most excited about right now in your life?
In my life? Oh, okay. I'm excited about embodiment, I would say. Just actually, not just intellectualizing spiritual concepts, metaphysical, but actually implementing them in my life. That's what I'm excited about.
Let's break that down. Because that's something, as soon as you said that, I went immediately toward my gene keys chart. In my life's work, my shadow is the intellect. And that's something that I've struggled with a lot, is just like having all these things up here. What has your journey been like to bring it down to your heart and truly embody all the teachings that you've gathered in the last couple of years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been studying a lot of things for a long time, and a lot of people know me for the books I talk about, whether it's the Eastern traditions or the science I break down, whatever it might be, to kind of fit into the spiritual paradigm and to see that we're all talking about the same thing. And what I noticed that was within myself, it was easy to talk about it. And throughout the years, even being online, part of the generational trauma my family has is eating themselves to just out of the game. My grandpa, I remember him, he basically did that. And I just saw my dad and he did that. And so I noticed how when I was getting into spirituality, I started to become aware of the shadows of coping, really. And everybody copes in certain ways. It just depends on how healthy is your cope. Because you could say from one perspective, meditation is a cope, right? So, yeah, I basically left the physical body behind, and I was very ungrounded at the beginning of my spiritual journey. I got into the spiritual concepts, and I started to understand them, and it was great, but there was no embodiment, so I felt really disconnected from my physicality. And even when I started to make content, I was a little overweight still. And so, for me, it's just been a process of integrating not only spirituality, not as an escapism, but rather as a way to realize the unbroken wholeness that exists within yourself. And so that's what I've been on I guess you could say journey, but I've been on a skit really to try to figure out the cosmic joke. So that's where I am, man.
Huh. And I know you started off very skeptical as well coming into this work. Then you found the law of one, essentially channeled teachings. And, just based off what we're talking about, this concept of intellect and heart, I know that in the law of one, they talk about the path of love and wisdom. So have you looked into that at all? Has it sat with you in a different way now that you're going through this?
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing to talk about. A lot of people, I would say at the beginning of my journey, knew me for Law of One. I stopped talking about Law of One about a year ago just because I felt like I started to see how channeled teachings could become a trap in themselves. And I actually yearned for more of a grounded spirituality. So I started to move towards Kriya Yoga, for example, which within a week of this recording, I'll be initiated into Kriya Yoga officially, which is Paramahansa Yogananda's lineage, for those of you that would know him. And he's probably, if somebody had to say who is the being that really figured it out, I would have to say it was probably Yogananda. It was probably Yukteswar, which was his master. And so for me, yeah, I think the Law of One does talk about that, but I'm really more interested in, at this moment, Buddhism. I'm more interested in Kriya Yoga, in the Shaolin path, and so in those traditions, it does talk about. I remember there's a part where Yogananda says that your greatest enemy is actually your bad habits. And remember, he's saying that in the 1940s,
before Atomic Habits, before that book was written,
way before. So and he didn't even really formally study the science. And what he did do, though, was he actually had his own theories. And there is a lot of stuff in Kriya Yoga that they've predicted that science is now starting to potentially be in the realm of discovering. So it's so interesting how, yeah, there is channeled stuff out there. And I think that if people resonate with it, that's great. But I want to know who the being is who's channeling. What is their life like? How do they live? And one of the things that I think people, even Christ, for example, people feel like they know how he lived. And it was the same way with Yogananda, and same way with Krishnamurti, right? These beings that we have record of their lives. We have record of what they were like in person. And I worry that the channeled stuff is just for money from a lot of these people. Not necessarily the Law of One, but like David Wilcock, for example, a lot of people that know him know Law of One. Both of those he was one of the first people for the Law of One. And I remember he used to say 99% of channeling is false. And I'm like, oh yeah, I get it now. It took me a while. Like probably Bashar's doing it great, I think. If there's one that was doing it decent, it would probably be him. But yeah, I'm kind of moving more away from the channeled stuff.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm going down a kind of different path in terms of the channeling. As you know, one thing that, and I also heard you say this once, is when we talk about truth, like what is truth? Obviously, there is not one universal truth, but our heart center acts as this filter mechanism where whenever we hear something, and you talked also about David Hawkins and the muscle testing, whenever we hear something, we kind of know truth by the way that it feels. And I'm also at a stage where this platform is also growing into becoming a hub, not only for science and for quantum physics and mysticism, but also channelers that are coming into the space that are uncovering past civilizations teachings and things like of this nature. So it's really interesting. And I'd love to know, like, you know, when you talked about grounded spirituality versus maybe some more ungrounded spirituality, where in you and where does it sit for you to discern between what feels like truth, what feels ungrounded, what feels grounded? What does your internal compass feel like and look like for you?
So to back up, I actually do think there is a universal truth, but the universal truth is not words. So
a symbol.
it could be a symbol. It would just be actually unity, which is what we call love here. Most of us do, but the level of unity that actually is, that's what self-realization actually is. That's what you can call moksha or enlightenment, that the Buddhists may have reached, or things like this. So truth, two things can be true simultaneously, but it's relative to if it even is in truth. And so what that might mean is, like, for example, you said Dr. Hawkins, well, he had his levels of consciousness, and that goes from 0 to 1,000. And when you reach 200, you step into truth. And so everything below 200 on his scale is in falsehood. So when you have two truths, you could say courage and neutrality are both relatively true. But what is the thing that we're testing against with kinesiology muscle testing, for example? And the overall premise is that unity is the highest thing. So you're testing against unity in a sense to see if it's true or false. And so that's saying that there's two fundamental forces in the universe, that being the separation type force and the unity force. And there seems to be a threshold in which our body can then feel when something is not in truth. So the emotions of this would be the fear, sadness, guilt, shame, these type of things. And so for me, I think that at some point you develop a level of discernment to be able to feel within your body if something is true based on the actual resonance of the words. And that's part of what intuition is to me, is that I can tell if it's true or how true it is. I mean, you'd have to be at a really advanced level to be able to tell everything always. But I think that's kind of one of the most important things you can have is that internal compass. And so for me, grounded spirituality versus, what were we calling it? Ungrounded, basically? Like, what's the difference?
Yeah.
Right? That was the original question?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, we made it back.
We made it back, right? And it's all for a reason. The ungrounded spirituality to me happens because a lot of the nature of spirituality is a lot of the times the unseen. So if there's a realm or things that are happening that are unseen or subtle energy, for example, then it's easy for people to come in and just make stuff up or intellectualize and then just kind of feed it to people and have really no embodiment. And so grounded spirituality to me is, if you're taking in spiritual material, what's your daily life look like during that time? And so the daily life is kind of the indicator whether you're grounded or not, or if the material is, because usually what we're taking in does produce an effect in our life internally as well. And so not only how do you feel when you're taking it in, but what are you doing during that time that may lead to embodiment? And, part of grounded spirituality, I think that actually leads in perfectly to what you're saying, like ancient civilizations. I think it's great if we can study ancient civilizations or if we want a remote view or do these things. But, if we're like overweight and unhappy, it really don't matter too much what's going on in the ancient civilization, And that's part of it. It's escapism. That's what I feel like. It's like there's really two parts of ungrounded spirituality. It would be exploring things externally while our life is a mess internally, or how we feel chaotic and not at peace. And so it's looking for that external kind of even savior energy, looking for something to save us outside of ourselves. And so I think that's one of the big things. And then the other escapism is actually more of the religious fundamentalism escapism, which is there's some place better than here. So let's focus on being better so that we can go somewhere else, versus actually learning to make this human experience or change it or transform it within ourselves to be something that we not only enjoy, but feel like we're thriving and feel like we are connected to everything that is around us in the people, and to really what we feel called to do. Too.
Yeah, and there's been people that have made breakthroughs not only in science but in human consciousness that have been able to develop practices or exercises to be able to connect with all that is, connect to the universal mind. What were some of the practices that Albert Einstein was getting into to get all the insights that he was able to gather in his lifetime?
It's interesting. You've got a lot of people figuring out this subconscious mind stuff and the superconscious stuff, but it looks like Nikola Tesla and Edison we're really already doing this a long time ago. And Einstein, right? We're talking about Einstein too.
Yeah, let's bring him in there too.
Edison, I meant to say Einstein. I'm just going to correct myself. So Einstein had the idea to make a device to where when he would sit on his chair and try to get into these states where he would tap into his intuition or to that superconscious mind, really that place where ideas come from, that if his head would nod, then he wouldn't. It's kind of funny to think about, but his head would nod, a bell would go off. So if you fell asleep, boom. Because if you're falling asleep, you're trying to lower your brainwave states. You're falling asleep, you're already too low. You need to wake yourself up to try to find that brainwave state that is just before sleep, depending on which one you want. We don't actually know from my research which one he was going for, but he knew the premise.
He's going full on gamma.
He wanted cosmic consciousness. Maybe he got it. So that's where he said that he received his ideas from, was that field. And Nikola Tesla is very similar to that, receiving ideas from the field. And, there's things like simultaneous invention where multiple people get the same idea across the world and they file for the patents at the same time. And so that shows like the interconnectedness of humanity, but it also shows that maybe we're in an expansion pack, and the expansion pack actually just wants to continue the premise of the game, like the Yuga cycles, where we're in a cycle and we're ascending up in the cycle at this point, according to the Yuga cycles. We can talk about that if you want.
Let's get into it. Break down the cycles for us.
Well, the flat earthers are going to be pissed. So basically, this is how Yukteswar and Avatar Babaji, this is the essence of how the game works. Like if we want to talk about what are the rules of the game, well, one of the macro rules is that everything works in cycles. And Taoism knows this, Buddhism knows this, but the way Kriya Yoga describes this is that there's a central sun. We're actually in a binary star system, which if we look at the solar system and the galaxy wide, there's more binary star systems than not binary from what we can see. So there's evidence of, it's not just us. We're not the only one with it. No. So in Kriya Yoga, you've got that second star, right? And I could pull up a chart, but I'm going to try and describe it for people who are listening. Basically, you've got your second star at the top. Imagine that, right? And then a circle. And we are orbiting that second star, and that would be our entire solar system, right? So this could also lead into the scientific theories about, like, is there another planet out there? There's some weird orbiting stuff going on. That's been happening in science for a long time. And so what Yukteswar wrote in the book called The Holy Science was that that's a 25,000 year cycle, something very similar to other cycles that we see out there from other cultures, and that we are out of the Kali Yuga, which would be if you want to think about it in expansion pack terms, it would be the most primitive expansion pack. It would be like, we don't know anything. The thing that controls the expansion pack is how close we are to the sun determines our level of consciousness as a whole of humanity. So it's more of like on a cycle than we're figuring out, and we don't figure it out based on free will and like, can we get it? No, it's actually like there's a planned way that this thing works. So that should actually help a lot of people that struggle with, I feel weird in this society. Well, if the Yuga cycles are a thing, then you're supposed to be quote unquote weird right now, because we're in what could be called, we're coming out of the dark age, so to speak. And so in that age, there's going to be most of the majority of people that don't understand what the hell's happening here. And so it's not out of the ordinary. So you're like, okay, so it's supposed to be like that. Yes. And that's kind of the evolutionary trajectory that we're on. So,
and Nick, what are some of the properties of this sun that contribute directly or maybe influence the shifting of human consciousness?
So that's from what I understand, it would then be speculation. I don't remember exactly if it did say in the Holy Science what the properties are. I think the general premise is that in the same way, if you move closer to the sun, it's going to get hotter, right? You're going to get hotter. Then that second sun, there's the electromagnetics of that second sun influences our human consciousness, and there actually is other evidence of that too. The solar cycles by Alexander Shizetsky, who was a Russian scientist way back in the day, hundreds of years ago, and he started mapping out the cycles of the sun. People know that there's more sunspots and less sunspots. That works in a cycle, right? And what happens is you start to map this cycle out. When the sun is hotter, human activity increases by a ton. Most important human events in human history, according to Alexander Shizetsky, happened during a solar maximum, meaning the sun was at its hottest point. And so you can use the same premise. If you wanted to take that a step, what would that second sun's premise be? It would be the same thing. It increases human activity, and it probably increases our ability to tap into interconnectedness as well. Man, again, I don't know the science of that, but it would have something to do with that for sure.
Oh. And talk to us about 2025 then. If we're talking about the solar cycles and the maximum points, what's going to happen 2025?
Well, that's going to be the maximum. And when that maximum comes, I mean, if people wanted to say when is something important going to happen, probably 2025, just due to the evidence that people can say astrology, people can say this. If you want something that's grounded in science, like we have evidence of, it would be the solar cycle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we don't know what's going to happen. I'm not a future guy either.
Hold on.
Prophecies, bro. Prophecies are an interesting one because I feel like a lot of people love like the Nostradamus and this other stuff like that. And it's like our timeline is changing so much all the time. That's how I truly feel. So if someone looks into the timeline, it's like they're looking into our present trajectory. So that's why I feel like if you go to a psychic or you have these psychic things or you have these channelers that are giving us this timeline or whatever, which they do, and a lot of them, it can turn out being BS. And a lot of people even tried to prophesize something was going to happen during this eclipse, and that shit happened. And that just goes to show a lot of the times, I think the prophetic stuff is used to drive fear into people thinking it's going to be bad because they're seeing this timeline. But here's the thing. If that is true, what I just said, that these psychics don't even know what they're doing, though, because they don't have that spiritual discernment to understand that they're kind of being manipulated and that they're actually, not saying what's really going to happen because they truly believe it and they haven't went through that spiritual work to get to the point where they themselves can recognize these things. And so to them, it feels true. And to them, they might think that they're not doing it nefariously, but they just don't really know any better. That's kind of how I see it.
Let's bring in Uncle Joe into the conversation. Dr. Joe Dispenza, one of my favorite sort of teachings, and this comes packed into a quote, is a collective network of observers determines reality. And you've also said that each person is rendering their perspective according to wave-particle duality. So even getting into that is like, if there's many minds focusing on one outcome, that timeline will shift in order for that timeline to render, which is like a video game or like a computer simulation term. So talk to us about that, of how we can alter reality through just observing one outcome. And even if, when it comes to these prophetic things, what does that look like for people?
Woo! What a question. There's a lot of different ways to go with that because it's almost like I kind of want to take the end of it first. The prophetic things and what does that look like? So I like to use movies as an example because I feel like it helps me relate to these topics. So there's a movie called Tomorrowland. Have you seen it?
Tomorrowland? I don't think I've seen that one yet.
Now you got me scared, dude. I'm gonna make sure I get the name right. Is that it? Is that the time? There's one that came out. Yeah, it is. Okay.
Hey, I'll watch it. I'll watch it. I'll watch it.
It came out in like 2015. Okay, so the premise of Tomorrowland is, well, I might spoil a little bit here, but it's okay. The premise is that when everybody thinks the world's going to end, it actually is. They can actually look into the future and they have a solid view. They've developed a device that can tell what's going to happen in the future, 100%. And it's desolate. Everything is going to get destroyed. And there's this one girl, the main character, who truly in her heart believes it isn't going to end. And at that moment where that's measured, there's a flicker on the screen. And you can see that the future actually has a flicker of beauty. And nothing gets destroyed. And it all works out. And I think that premise is key to even what Dr. Joe's saying. Do you have that Dr. Joe quote again?
Yeah, a collective network of observers determines reality.
So what he's saying from a video game perspective is we're in an expansion pack, we're playing a game, and the expansion pack isn't fully set, like how it's going to work. And the game is so complex that we get to choose through our own observation of the preferred reality, or even what we think is going to happen. It's not even preferred. That is the determining factor as to how the expansion pack plays out. And so what that means is that, yeah, we might be going up in the Yuga cycle, but we might actually, if we decide as a collective to go down and then go up eventually, like restart another civilization, that may be in the cards for us. Like we can decide that. And so if people want to give up, that's a whole nother conversation. And we can talk about that later, but I want to stay on track with this. So wave particle duality is a quantum physics discovery, one of the biggest discoveries ever made. And if people understood how big this was, if people really understood this concept, it could change the world. That what we observe, we render. In the same way that when I'm on Instagram scrolling, if I'm observing that over and over, that algorithm's like, he's eating that up. Let me give him more. And that's what's happening in our lives. That's how this game kind of works. And so if Dr. Joe's putting it a bunch of observers render that, what he's saying is that our collective intention, either consciously, well, mostly unconsciously, but it's becoming conscious, that is determining our reality. And that's why humanity is moving into a different time period where we have a level of consciousness in the society. I can go in and actually buy organic food. It's real. Wow. Like things that you would think are basic, we are needing to learn as a society, but it's kind of like we had to go through this in order to have the discernment between what is light and what is dark. Because a lot of the times Nietzsche was actually really a big hitter on this. Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher, that sometimes he said in Europe hundreds of years ago that he was against Christianity because he didn't really like it that much. Let's just say that. Because it had slave morality, which means that it teaches people to just follow the crowd instead of actually having master morality, is what he called it, which is you yourself are determining your own principles, not based on what other people are telling you. So when we talk about rules of the game, there are like metaphysical rules. And then there's the rules that people like to make up in order to control people. So it's a very slippery slope. And I think certain traditions have done that really well, that navigating, and some of them are very strict. And there's a path for everyone. So to get back to what we were saying, Dr. Joe's right. Yeah.
Uncle Joe coming in clutch.
Uncle Joe. When you said that I read The Law of One earlier, I picked up 3 books at the same time. It was You Are the Placebo, Dr. Joe, Law of One, and Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, Wayne Dyer, which is Taoism. So those 3 were kind of my introduction to spirituality and the different concepts that were available, that are available.
Yeah. And as you progress in that journey of looking for that wisdom and information, you sort of came into this conclusion that we are living in a video game. And what you're proposing is that we don't need to work harder. We just need to understand how things work. So every video game, and I know you grew up playing video games in high school and when you were younger, what did you find out about how things weave together in this universal tapestry that we could tap into and say, I don't have to work that hard. Life can flow effortlessly once I understand some little keys here and there about the game.
Mm-hmm. So there's 2 different parts to that. I think there's the part that everyone is at a level. There's a way that the game works, but the game actually responds to how you're playing. Most people think that the game is set. That's actually part of the problem. For people to think that the game is set. Like, I just need to go to work, and if I earn this money, that's how the game is. But they don't call it a game. But it's still the same thing that they think. So it's almost as though what you learn is everyone is inherently has the power to play at the level that Christ was saying. That's why Christ's title, that's why the mystical teaching of Christ is something I'm absolutely fascinated with. And the idea that you're already enlightened, everyone already are inherently a part of the Christ consciousness, is what they might call it there. And if you really study the Bible, you'll see that that's actually what he's saying. He's not saying to worship me. He's saying I am. People take I am literally, as if he's talking about him. No, he's saying I am, as if if you understood symbolism, which is what I love about the Bhagavad Gita, for example, is that it's clear that this is symbolic. And in the East, they understand, let's take things in symbols. And in the West, everybody wants to take things literal. So to get back to the point, if everybody is already inherently at a high level of consciousness, meaning what they are is that, then it's actually a process of removing to level up, not just gaining. But it's a combination because there's skills that you can acquire in the game, but to let go of the programming is to reach a higher level. So that says that you have the power within yourself, that gives you the inherent power, which is dangerous for certain people in the world. They don't necessarily want people to understand that they have the power within themselves. And so when we realize that we have that, there's a linear path and there's a non-linear path. And so there's just different ways to play the game, essentially. Now, most people are playing the linear path thinking, I need to do this, this, and this, and I'll get this result. And then they placebo themselves into it, and they're like, it works. It's like, yeah, you placeboed yourself into believing that. In the same way that in Moon Knight, one of my favorite Marvel shows, one of my favorite concepts is that they go to the afterlife, and the hippopotamus god of Egypt says, oh, hey, there hasn't been anybody here in a while. And they're talking about the afterlife. And you're like, wait, what? So you're telling me that what I believe controls where I go in the afterlife. That's the concept that I'm getting at. And I think that just opens up the mind to see how powerful our intention is. What if we are creating the game, just like we were talking about earlier with Dr. Joe, creating the game in real time? What if we also creating that? That starts opening you up. You're like, oh shit, what is really going on here? And so, yeah, I would say that's where I would begin is it's not about what the set rules are, but to realize that the rules you've placed on yourself are the things that placebo themselves into existence, or not into existence, really into physical reality, because it already exists. So manifestation really isn't about trying to get things that don't exist, because it already does. And so that's a whole nother thing. But yeah.
Yeah, so you highlighted sort of like these limitations that we place on ourselves while we're playing the game, and that if we realize that a lot of the limitations that we've put are self-placed there, and if we can deprogram ourselves, we'll have access to more levels of this game. Have you found that there are, boundary points set into this game where certain universal laws come in that you can't trespass, or is it free game, no really rules to it? What is your perspective on that?
I'm trying to think of that first part of the question. Can you re-say the first part?
What?
Because I wanted to hit the whole thing, then I'm like, oh, I wanted to hit the first part, but I forgot. Somehow it slipped my head. I can just go for the second part.
We'll come back to it, yeah.
Okay. So the question then is there any fixed rules, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I think it would be arrogant for me to say I know the rules.
Yeah.
I think there are definitely things that I don't understand. And karma seems to be one of the ones that is pretty legit. And reincarnation seems to be one of those rules that you really can't bypass until you actually do the thing to stop the reincarnation cycle. So I would say karma and reincarnation are two that are massive. You've got the Kabbalion with the 7 Hermetic principles as well. Those are interesting. The law of vibration, everything vibrates, or the principle of vibration, that one would be, I would say, really accurate. As above, so below, the principle of correspondence, how it works in higher realms is how it works in lower realms. That one's very interesting. I don't know if it's true, but I think it's very interesting to think, okay, well, how it works in our realm is how it works in other places. I think the principle of gender is true as well. I think that's a 7th principle, that everything has a masculine and feminine polarity to it, and it's a balance between those two, and that's part of creation. But I think the big ones for people to understand is really how to complete the game if you want to, or how to play the game in a way that actually results in you evolving. That's what I would say the biggest ones are.
Yeah, and going back to sort of that first part of the question is really, what have you found out about why most people self-impose these boundary points or limitations onto themselves, and how do you start alleviating some of that suffering by giving people a new model of thinking, a new paradigm in that way?
So I think first off, we don't place all the limitations on ourselves. I think that society places them on us, but we're not a victim to that. I think that's really important, that you're not a victim. Like I saw this reel the other day. It's not your fault that society is messed up. It's like, it's not your fault, but that's the game right now. So you can't just be like, oh, well, you should just give me stuff for free, or, I should just get everything provided for me just because this happened. No, it's like, take responsibility and learn how to play the game at a high level, and then you'll have whatever really you want. That's what Jesus was even teaching 2,000 years ago, or many thousands of years ago. Seek ye the kingdom of heaven and its righteousness, and everything will be added unto you. So if you seek wholeness, it's symbolic. If you seek wholeness within yourself, the kingdom of heaven, he also said, the kingdom of heaven is within you. So if it's within you, then you don't need to go to church to find it. You don't need to go anywhere to find it. You don't need to go to any temples. It's literally right here. And so the paradigm to give people is that if you want to alleviate suffering, first we have to understand suffering. I think someone who did the alleviation of suffering the best, specifically this topic, is that's what Buddhism is, right? It's the alleviation of suffering and to stop the cycle of reincarnation through the alleviation of suffering. And you do that through removing opposites or seeing that opposites are part of a same fundamental unity. In the way that if you look at verse 2 of the Tao, one can see beauty only because one sees ugliness. And so a lot of the times our suffering is because we have ideas of what bad and good is. And we judge what is happening in our lives as bad or good already. Like it's already fundamental in how we see things. And that is there so that if we think something is bad, then we're in fear. Then we need to go to work and fix it and do these things. And we can spend our entire lives trying to fix something outside of us because we're told what the problem already is. Like that we don't have enough and we need to earn more money or we need to have this external car or whatever it might be. And so that paradigm is going within and realizing your true nature and start to tap into that potential. And you can do that through tapping into different timelines. That's what I did last year. I held a timeline shift challenge. And in that challenge, the paradigm is there's an infinite amount of timelines that exist. And if we can pick one and start to tap into what that would be like if I was experiencing that now and how that feels within my experience. Because most people are so disconnected from feeling good that they don't actually know what it feels like anymore. And so the first thing is to remember or figure out how to feel what it is that you want to feel or prefer to experience even. Whether that's even just a sense of like peace or fulfillment. Maybe you need to tap into the timeline where you're hiking in the Andes Mountains and you're just in awe of the perfection of it, or you're in awe of Göbekli Tepe or the pyramids or whatever it might be and how that feels. And so when you can do that, if you can do that, then you have to recognize that that's a placebo. That you just basically created that within your mind and you could experience it without actually experiencing it. So if that is true, even if it's hard to admit, that means that we can experience that without actually having. We can experience the emotions of peace, fulfillment, love, contentment, gratitude. It doesn't matter. One of those. And so that it's not about I'm only just trying to manifest or trying to get these things to eventually live this life, which is people then take that concept and just grab onto the external. I'm doing this to get something. But the deeper layer of that is if I can just sit with myself and tap into wholeness now and really do that through the future, through that timeline, and I do all the things that timeline version of me would do, then I'm actually going to shift my timeline to match that. And what happens is that if you do that for long enough, it doesn't have to be that long, you'll actually shift to that timeline. And then you'll see that that's what professional athletes do. They just don't say it. They just decided I'm going to be a professional athlete. And then what do? They train like they are one. And they do it. So people are doing this. They're just not saying it in mystical terms, you know?
I love that you broke that down because even in your own personal journey, you had to go through that when you lost this vast amount of weight, shedding it through your physical body. But I imagine there had to be a lot of emotional and mental work in order to get that outcome and shift that timeline in your body, in your vehicle suit. What was that journey like for you?
It's just a fucking decision, man. It really is. There's a moment in time, and it can be any moment, really the now moment, that someone could listen to this podcast and just decide, I actually am no longer going to seek comfort. I'm actually going to seek the opposite of what my mind thinks is comfort. And that's what it was for me. I had this pivotal moment where I just said, you know what? Nah, I'm not doing this to myself anymore. I am going to, no matter what it takes, achieve the physical form that I prefer, that I want to experience. And with that level of commitment, it's a recognition that it's going to feel hard to the mind, and that the only place that there is solace from the mind is in the present moment. And the present moment specifically beyond the thoughts of what the present moment is. And there's a reality that exists beyond the symbols. So, for example, if I'm looking around right now and I'm not paying attention to anything else in my mind, I'm actually just observing my environment. I'm observing my breath. And I'm not in the realm of thoughts. This is why people say the gym is medication for me. Sprinting, running, jogging, even driving. And it's the same premise that Rick Rubin said in The Creative Act, that you can use distraction as a way to get into the present moment, because it keeps your conscious mind busy if I'm driving or if I'm at the gym, and it allows something deeper to come through. And so that's just like a level where you can use doing something physically to tap into a higher state, but you don't have to. It's really just, like I said, different ways of playing the game. Some people are really physical in this game, and some people are really more into the mental and the philosophical. And I'm trying to find a balance. I've always been trying to find a balance. It's been a journey, man. You know, I've had ups and downs along. I feel like part of my path is just being online and trying shit, and then people take the journey with me because I'm changing a lot. You know, even because I've been online for a minute. You know.
Yeah. Do you feel that adversity and struggle are part of the design of this game?
The Buddha did. I mean, the tenet of Buddhism is that everything is suffering, basically. Life is suffering. And what I think he meant by that was that we don't come in aware of what suffering is and being able to alleviate it for a minute, for a long time, like years and years, right? When we're born to when, you know, it takes people maybe their whole life, they don't understand that. So if we come in here so-called asleep, or we come in here unconscious, just doing things, NPC-like behavior, not saying they are NPCs, but NPC-like behavior, people can go their whole lives doing that. And so it's like, I would say, yeah, it's built into the game, but it's also built into the game that we need that to awaken, in the same way that I was saying earlier that society might need what it's going through to awaken. Yeah, as above, so below. In our micro lives, we need the suffering. As much as people hate it, it really is the only thing that's going to get them to their calling. But they're cursing the suffering, saying, why couldn't my life be easier? Because if it was easier, then I wouldn't have to suffer. But the paradigm is that you're causing yourself to suffer by seeing it as a bad thing that's happening and not seeing the gift that is in this moment. That there's something in this moment that if you didn't have it, you might never get to where. So what is in this moment for you? That's a question that I had to ask myself. And at the beginning of my weight loss, if we want to go back to that, it was, I can see myself really looking and feeling really good in my body. I know that potential exists. That timeline is out there. And I'm not going to live my whole life never seeing it. And I just made that decision, and I understood that, again, my mind is going to feel like it's adversity. It's going to feel like it's suffering, but there's actually a place even beyond that. Because when you stay there, you kind of end up in the religious paradigm, which is you got to suffer through life. And there's a way to play the game to witness suffering and to transcend that suffering by not seeing it as ugly in the way that the Tao would say it. You're not seeing it as ugly or beauty. It just is right here. And it's like if I play a video game, I could see the video game as this game sucks. This game is hard. Or I could see like, oh, it's actually kind of exciting that this game is hard because it's going to take more skill. It's going to take more. It's going to push me to my limits. And so if you take that perspective of our reality, imagine how much better you would perform, or how much of a higher level you would feel like you're at, how more connected, whatever you want to say that end goal is for you. But I find that paradigm of understanding that the game is kind of meant to be hard, but that it can become easy if you allow it to be. In some ways, there's just different levels. Yeah.
I'd really love to catch your views on destiny.
Destiny. Like, does it exist?
Maybe not.
just go. It's like destiny. Go. Just go.
Take it wherever you want.
There's probably predetermined events that we programmed into the game for ourselves to experience. It might not even be a specific event, but it's like the energy of an event. Meaning that if you progress, let's say this, the end goal might be for you to play the game at level 57. Maybe it's not even, if it's out of 100, let's say it's 57. And you start the game, you're born in, and before this, you were at 50. So it's just like 6 levels. But in order to get there, you need to have a parent that, and I'll relate this to myself. Maybe you need to have parents that hate each other. So you'd see conditional love and think that that's all there is. Not be able to trust anybody. Eat so much just to cope with the pain. Never really go through it and sit with it. That I needed that to happen as maybe a predetermined event so that I could wake up, in a sense, to what I really was and what my potential was. And so destiny might be, I decided that I need these things in order to receive from that experience the wisdom that not only will lead me to my calling, but help other people in some way as well. I think destiny is part of both of those things. It's also, it's not just for us. It's for other people.
I love that you framed it in the way of, this was a situation predetermined so that you could wake up. And I also received a similar teaching when I was studying Dolores Cannon's work. And when they talk about the soul contracts that we make before incarnating into this lifetime, we'll pick out certain events. We'll pick out, maybe our family, things that will have the highest potential for us to find that destiny or find that mission in this lifetime. Do you believe that we make these soul contracts before we come in?
Could. It's hard for me to believe because there's so much I don't know.
Yeah.
In my work, I realize the vastness of what I don't know. And so I'm just like, it definitely could be. I would lean more towards that. It makes sense and it feels true to me.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. There's just so much that would explain. And, if we're talking about Dolores Cannon, part of that is also that person might have been the person you feel like wronged you might have wronged in a life before. And if you want to take it even to a Yogananda perspective, he did talk about how our past life inhibitions, what our personality was in a past life, what the issues were, that those come into this life. I think he calls them prenatal. So even the Kriya Yoga masters do see a level of contract, but more it's like the algorithm has to show you what you experienced or the algorithm has to show you what you did in that cause and effect relationship, that being another principle in the Kabbalion, right? Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think, though? Do you really feel like soul contracts, or you feel like, I'm
in alignment with it. It feels that, the more people I talk to in this space, the more I explore within myself, I do see that there are certain points in my life where I look back. Obviously, everything is different. Connecting the dots back, you can't really connect them forward, like Steve Jobs said. But when I connect the dots back, I have to come to the conclusion, like it's a no-brainer for me, that it says that had to happen. That had to happen for you to be where you're at. And regardless if there's a higher aspect of myself that chose, specifically me meeting that person, going through this thing with a business or with a partner or with family, like regardless if someone picked that out or even a different aspect of myself picked that out, there is a feeling of just, it had to happen. There was no other way. And when we resist that feeling, when we resist like why, and we start asking ourselves, why did it have to happen that way? That's when our ego is taking over the show, where it's telling us it could have been different. That's when regret comes in. And then we take that regret to our grave. We take all that hatred, that enviness, whatever negative emotion comes with that event. So in some ways, I would love to have said, my soul made some dope ass contracts before coming in here, and we have some more magic coming. But in the end of the day, I think it's just not resisting what happened before in the past, and yeah, coming to that conclusion of it had to happen this way.
I think part of that is Jordan Peterson does this a lot with religion. He asks, what is the utility of that thought? Meaning, how does that thought improve your life if it does? And I feel like soul contract, it can improve your life to see that maybe you have a parent that you don't get along with, and you had a rough relationship with, but maybe they're here to teach you something through the way that they're behaving. Or maybe they're here to give you the gift, so it's no longer you're resentful because someone isn't the way you think that they should be. It's that you accept them the way that they are, and you see that through that there is something for you. Maybe that's compassion for them. Maybe it's learning how to not abandon yourself when they are calling you names, or maybe they're doing things, or you're not trying to save them from themselves because you feel like they shouldn't be going through that, when the truth is that we don't know. Maybe they need to go through that. Maybe they need to go through the suffering doing this to themselves, even though you can see it, but they can't, because that's going to result in their own evolution. Because if you just gave them the answer, it's like if I'm in calculus 7 and you're in calculus 1, and I'm like, bro, look, calculus 6 taught me this, and they're like, what? But it doesn't work because they're not at that level. They're not ready for it. And it's not a better or worse level. It's just like they can't see it. And so that's why it's almost part of the maturation process of spirituality is to learn that we don't know what's best for anyone besides ourselves. And all we can do is share what worked for us and allow that to be the message. And when you get into territory of this is what you should believe, this is what is 100%, people that talk in absolutes, you ride the Sith line. That's why I would think it was Obi-Wan that said, only Sith deal in absolutes, right? So that's why I'm very careful about dealing in absolutes. It's because we don't really know. And anyone that thinks that they know fully, it's probably full of shit. Probably. There's a high chance. But if they're like, this is what it's pointing towards, I think keeping that humility and keeping that openness to what life has to offer and the unknown, I think is key.
I love the Star Wars analogy. One of the things that really drew me into your work was the video I watched where you related the Guardians of the Galaxy movie to the Anunnaki creation story. And I just love, I think we can open a whole rabbit hole here of how movies and entertainment have sprinkled in certain truths in plain sight. What have been the most impactful ones for you to realize?
Well, there's a fresh one because I just saw Dune 2.
Ooh,
have you seen Dune?
Yes. Let's get into that. Break that one down.
That one's pretty fresh. Right, because so I didn't get a chance to go see it in the theater, and it came out like yesterday or the day before, and I just bought it immediately, and I saw it. And what I noticed is the Dune series shows you just how is a prophecy created, or is a prophecy is it already in place, or is a prophecy something that people come up with? Do you create your own prophecy? That's, when you saw, I don't know about you, when I saw Dune 2, I'm like, are they creating the prophecy, or does it already exist? Because we don't know if the mother is actually just like creating it. Is it like divine? It's such an interesting thing, and it shows you how religion can be used for power, for sure, but that can be good or bad. And it was interesting. One of my favorite quotes from Dune 2 is at the very end. You remember the part where the Emperor says, and this could be spoilers, of course. So the Emperor says, "You know why I killed your father?" Remember that?
Yeah, yeah.
Do you remember the exact quote?
No, I don't.
Okay. It's something along the lines of, because your father believed in the rules of the heart, and that makes your father a weak man. And so that gives insight into how the Sith of the world view the Jedi of the world, not just in Star Wars, but if we want to combine references here, it's like there really is a Jedi and the Sith. And anyone who is part of that life-taking mentality, they view the heart as weakness. And it's ironic because the strongest thing you can do is be in the darkness and activate your heart. The hardest thing to do in this reality is to activate your heart when you feel like you're wronged. To not act out of vengeance, to not act out of hate. And that's what we see in our world, is so many people doing that. But the reason why, think about how easy it is, dude. It's easy when you get angry to just be like, all right, I'm just going to ride this anger. Like actually tapping into the heart. So that actually led me to that truth and seeing it again. You just get insight into how those types think. And when you understand how they think, you can see it in society. And so I think there was also interesting references. If we just break it all down, they had the blue, what was that called? The blue substance?
It was like a psychoactive substance that they would take to see these psychic powers.
Yeah, so that's like a reference to DMT or ayahuasca, basically. Because they would ingest it, and then they'd be able to see basically the dead. Or see into that realm, which people have different experiences
the spice,
with that.
They called it.
The spice is a different one. They had the thing, because how they got that blue liquid was that they killed the worm, and while it was dying, it did that. And so it's like those weird things we see in our reality. Like, how do you get some of those substances? You're like,
the frog
you're
venom
in the back of a toad.
Yeah,
whatever. Cow shit. That's what it is. And so it's kind of funny how you see that in our reality. It's like these weird things that, yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of deep symbolism in that movie, and I think it got me thinking. Definitely got me thinking. Anything that comes to mind for you?
Well, I'd love to stay on that topic of the Sith versus the Jedi, because it's been a while since I've seen the Star Wars movie, but the Force, right? The Force and both sides, both the Sith and the Jedi, from my remembering, was that they could both utilize this Force, but they would utilize it in different ways. So let's talk about those two sides that Star Wars very clearly lined up to demonstrate what is going on in the world in terms of these different forces. And what is that force that we're all able to tap into, for good or for bad, or if there even is a good or a bad.
So if there was any concept in any movie that was the most accurate to our reality, truth hidden in plain sight, it would probably be the Force. And science is discovering this through, they have their quantum field theory. You have people like Donald Hoffman, Case Against Reality, cognitive neuroscientist, right? He's coming I think what's he at? UC Irvine or one of those?
He's at Irvine,
in California.
Yeah.
So they're doing research to basically discover that reality isn't what it seems to be. And there might be an interconnected field that connects us all. And you got people like Rupert Sheldrake talking about morphogenetic fields. Like there's these fields that shape us, but that there's actually even bigger fields. And so the panpsychist might say this as consciousness is fundamental, meaning there's some fundamental substrate that is underlying everything. But in the spiritual traditions might say this is the Tao. I mean, the Force really is Taoist. Because if we look at the Eastern traditions, they're talking about Qi, right? I mean, Qigong, it literally is tapping into the Force. That's what it's meant to be in some respects. So it's moving the energy within your body. And so that's a whole different concept, like the more focus on what does it do to the body, the Force. But to take it more of a macro, yeah, the Force is basically formlessness. And anyone can tap into the Force. You can tap into the Force in the movies through certain aspects. Like if you have midichlorians and there's that whole topic. But I think what's more fascinating is how close PK, which is psychokinesis, there's a lot of research out there. For example, The Conscious Universe is a book by Dean Radin, where he just explores that there's so much scientific evidence that it's unrefutable. Jessica Utz was a statistician, and she was looking at the stats of how much evidence we have of these extrasensory phenomenon like PK and like telepathy. And she had a quote, something along the lines of, if it wasn't this touchy of a subject, it would already be proven. Like if this was any other field that wasn't telepathy or being able to move things, then it would already be statistically enough for people. But people just are afraid of change. They're afraid of change in science because that means that they have to admit that they've been teaching something that is incorrect. And humans don't like to admit when they're wrong right now that much. And so the quantum field theory and the wave particle duality really fit into this. It's as though everything is a wave until it's observed. Meaning, I never explained the double slit, but for those that don't know, the double slit experiment is the experiment I was talking about earlier. That is the most important, that I would say, one of the most important discoveries we've ever made. And it's that when I'm observing particles going through two slits, what happens is that when I'm observing it, they go where you would expect. They go straight on. They go right on the board on the other side. Like you would think. They just pretty much go straight. But when I'm not observing it, when it's not being observed, it goes on the board like a wave. And that is mind-blowing because it shows us that when it's not being observed, then it's not fully rendered from a wave to a particle, because you could say that's how video games work partly as well. I mean, it's a lot of ones and zeros, binary, but things are not fully rendered unless the person experiencing it needs it to be rendered. That's how they save computing power. And that's another conversation of like, what part of the simulation are we in? Are we one away from base reality, or are we really far away? Like, is this an alien simulation, or is this an alien video game? That's another thing. But the premise is that, yeah, when we observe reality, it changes it. And so that's the same fundamental premise with the Force, that we just take it one step further. When I have an intention, they call this mind matter in science. When I have an intention, that actually influences reality. And there are studies to show by Dean Radin that random number generators can be affected by people's consciousness. When they have an intention to make it not random and to affect the random numbers, they can do so. And this has been statistically shown. And so for people to say that the mind has no effect on anything external, that's already been proven false. And so that the next level of that, if Think about evolution, right? We're going back to the Yuga cycles, baby. When we get closer to that sun, maybe that force power activates within us, and maybe what we're doing now is like certain humans have PK or psychokinesis, like they can move things. Like we've seen some evidence of these masters who've been practicing for a long time, been able to put their hands through walls, do these things. They can have basically a level of heat come out of their hands to start paper on fire. So it makes sense that field would become more accessible if we are closer to unity. And that would be for the light side. And you could say that power is attained either in the dark or in the light. And in the middle, that's where most people are, is that they really haven't chose. But the funny part about it is that when you choose both, that's complete unity. It's like being outside, it's being around the circle. If you look at the yin yang, you know how there's the white and the black and it goes around. Well, if you're on the outside of the circle, that it's like the essential unity of both. And so we can talk about like ultimate metaphysical truths, but if we want to keep it like grounded in like the light and the dark and the Jedi, then it would be kind of like the Jedi code. I mean, I will have had a podcast come out by now. It's funny we're talking about this. I've been working on a podcast about this concept, Star Wars and Taoism. And yeah, I mean, I actually have the Jedi code on a mind map, because what I like to do is just put things on mind map. And it's funny how they're so intercorrelated. You know, so here's a Jedi code for you.
You can share your screen if you want.
Okay. I you know what? I'll do that. Let's see here. Can I share? Oh, it's not allowing me to share. It's all good. It's not your fault. My computer. Anyways, it'll be easier. Here we go. There is no emotion, there is peace. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. There is no passion, there is serenity. There is no chaos, there is harmony. There is no death, there is the force. So that's the Jedi code, and it's very Taoist, because Taoists try to remove those extremes, back to what we were saying earlier, to find that still point. Many people have heard that story of the Taoist farmer who, you know, he doesn't know if things are good or bad. It's like things keep happening. And it's like, it's good for 1 second, then it's bad, then it's good. And so to find that still point, that 0 point within, is to realize that those extremes are things that we make up in our mind subjectively, and that those can be changed. And so then the question is what game do you want to play? Do you want to go for the like Taoist master game and just like let go of all of it? Or do you want to move it all into, it's all for me, it's all a gift for me? Both of those have utility. It's just, again, really important for one to have a goal in mind of what they want to experience. And then reality can respond to that in some way. And that can be adaptable, but it's like you can't take the journey if you don't have a destination. And so if you don't set a place or thing or feeling or emotion, then you get lost in this limbo. And then no wonder most people are distracted, because they're not tapped into even what they want to experience, or even we were talking about earlier, their calling, what their destiny, their gift is. And so if you're disconnected from both those, the natural byproduct is to feel sadness, depression, fear, because that's just kind of where our reality's at, you know.
What is it like for someone to choose both sides, as you said? Is there an example of a living being or someone that from history that you could say, oh, that person essentially chose both?
Chose both in what concept?
When you were talking about...
In one context?
Yeah, when we were talking about the yin and yang in the Tao, finding the unity point, there's essentially two other paths, and then going beyond that, you said you can only get there by choosing both sides. Or is it just more of like a perspective of realizing there is no two sides, it's all one side of the two differing coins?
Yeah. Okay, you did.
Yeah.
You already answered the question. That's it.
Yeah.
I think it's like thinking this. You can see it as a magnet. There's a positive and negative end on the magnet, and that's real. Like we can measure those. but it's all one magnet. And so you can focus on the positive and negative, which is a real subjective experience we're having. Where the game seems real, feels real, things seem to clash into each other. Or you can move beyond that and self-realize, so to speak, and that you would move beyond the paradigms of focusing on one or the other. And you would actually do that through kind of having spiritual experiences. Yogananda would say you turn your searchlights inward. And so through that meditation, it's like you don't really walk the path. Well, like you kind of walk the path, but it's more of like it's already you. You're both. I think that's what the fundamental realization is that the thing that is doing everything is you. But they call it the Tao. Or they might call it certain gods in Hinduism. And it's just it's just you watching, it's you playing with yourself here. When someone says there's no one else here, it doesn't mean that you're real and nobody else is. It means that everyone is pretending to be something, but everyone else is you. So it's not that you're like alone. It's that there's nothing but not the fake you, but the real you, unity. That's more what I mean. And then the personalities are extra. And so if you see that fundamental nature of someone else like that, that would be basically seeing the Tao, seeing the Force, seeing consciousness within everyone. And then I think that's why you have people like Jesus on the cross saying, forgive them for they don't know what they do. It's because the nature of this reality is to not know, because we all come in and we have our memory wiped. And so developing compassion is to realize the nature of the game, or kind of how the game works. That's why I said one of the most important rules is reincarnation. So you see that like we keep coming back here, but we all come back in the same way. So if people don't understand, they don't know what's going on, it's our responsibility as beings who have really in integrity are doing their best to understand what's happening. It's our responsibility to share that with the world, because how else is it going to change? If not us, then who? So it's us.
How would you break down reincarnation, as we've sort of like sprinkled it through the whole conversation? How would you explain this process or unfolding in the most simple terms, let's say?
Earth is a level. Let's just call it level 7. And in order to get to the next level, there are requirements. So you keep having to respawn until you complete the level. And so there are many different people that say that there's different requirements. We don't actually know what it is. I think that it makes sense that it's something to do with love, something to do with compassion, something to do with being kind and loving, and something to do with reaching your potential. It's as though Yogananda said, what's the purpose of life? And he said that it was to create perfect beings. So it's almost like this is the simulator that turns you into hero. That's what I would say reincarnation is. And until you become that hero, until you become that main character yourself, you keep respawning. So you go back into the lobby, you look at what you did, and you're like, I'm going to come back and do it again. And then you can actually, in the game, get benefits from playing over and over. Meaning you might have gifts like the Beethovens who come in and they're like, 5 years old? And they're able to just play the piano, do their thing. Like, it's crazy how some people have that natural talent. The explanation for that is that maybe they've done it before. Did you spill water all over yourself?
No, just something fell. But
okay.
Back to Marvel for a second.
Sure.
In that Guardians of the Galaxy 3, not to spoil anything, but it's super similar because I also dove into Sakurai Sitchin with the Anunnaki and the Sumerian tablets. And I was watching that movie. I'm like, Like, what? But one thing that stood out was at the end, as they're on this like huge ship, this creator guy, this being that would go around planets and genetically engineer and modify the species, he had stored in one sort of room these star children, or these next stage of evolution. I'm not sure if he called it that way in the movie, but what does that mean to us right now?
You mean like what is that, what he did mean?
What does it mean for if this movie is highlighting essential truths, what does it mean that there is a next stage of evolution coming with the children?
Well, it's interesting. Human design actually talks about that in 2027. There's going to be like some sort of change, some sort of mutation, and that the children coming in after that time are going to be different.
So don't have kids until 2020. I'm joking.
Exactly. You already got it, dude. Yeah, so it would mean that the game is changing. The game is created to evolve itself, meaning if we take the Yuga cycles again, that means that human evolution is going to just genuinely increase. So if we just take the model we literally just talked about too, with reincarnation, there's going to be beings who might come in. I think the star children might be pointing to the theory that people come in from different star systems. They don't just keep reincarnating on Earth over and over, but there's people that have been playing other games in other star systems that come over and they're like, hey, I'm going to play this game now. Or there's a lot of talk about the Earth being in one of the hardest games, and these beings come to help us. So it could be true. It would make sense that there's not only just one lobby, Earth, that there's probably billions of lobbies, meaning there's billions of games to be played in one universe. And so some beings in some other universe, or probably not other universe, probably other star system or galaxy, might be like, I just want to come, I want to go over here. I want to play this game. And then they might actually get stuck in the cycle of reincarnation. So they might not want to be playing the game anymore. That's probably why they're salty. But, it just is, that would be the reason that I would say where that goes.
Yeah. And it's like slippery territory when talking about that, of there are these beings here coming down to Earth that are going to save us, because that could shift some people into that savior mentality, which is what I believe, sadly, many religions have been playing that program over and over again of the next prophet, the next savior, the next Jesus, the next incarnate. And it was so funny. I shared a meme the other day on my story. I think it's probably still up there, but I'll put it up on the screen. But it's essentially Jesus, and he's saying, bro, I never said I was literally coming back in physical body, bro. It's more of like a consciousness that is returning, like a Christ consciousness, bro, like a crystalline consciousness, like millions of people will embody it. So for a moment, let's talk about the return of that Christ consciousness. And maybe even some of these children will have that online already in many ways. But that's not to say that no one that isn't born after 2027 can't tap into it. How do you see the return of this Christ consciousness on Earth right now?
Well, first, I think everybody wants to be somebody that's not from here. Who wants to say, I'm responsible for this shit. I've been doing this for 200 lives. We couldn't figure it out. Nobody wants to say that. Everybody wants to be like, yeah, I'm from way the fuck over there. Where's the farthest one?
You've heard of the Pleiades, bro? That's
right.
Did we know each other from Illyria?
Right. Somewhere not here, because this is fucked. So, yeah, Yogananda said that Christ consciousness was going to return in thousands of people. I mean, he reached a level that's available to anyone. That was the point of what I think the one that we call Christ, I think that was what he was trying to teach, is that it's not about me. I mean, he kept focusing on other people. You'll do greater things than me. If he's saying you'll do greater things than me, how can we sit here and say that he's going to save us? Like, isn't that contradictory just in itself? So it's easy for someone, this is what it is. People want to take the easy route. And for us, it's a lot easier if somebody else is going to do the work and save me, because then I don't have to do nothing. Like, I can just say some words. I think that's really what it comes down to. Why does that happen? Because humanity didn't have the discernment. Why? Because one of the first things you learn in this world is that not everyone has your best interest at heart. One of the first spiritual truths, that is. And if you understand that not everyone has your best interest at heart, then you start to question things off the rip, not assuming, he's trying to help me. Because that's what people do. I think people honestly, innocently, they want to go to church. They just want somebody to tell them the truth. But they don't realize that they have to look deeper, that this reality is designed to kind of be illusion in an illusion. And that's not a bad thing. It's just the way the game works. And so the return of Christ is not him coming from the skies. Revelation is all symbolic. Revelation is all symbolic. And Yogananda broke that down in clear, crystal clear terms. If someone wants to research what the second coming of Christ is, go read the book. He's got 3 books on it. He went 1,600 pages. Like, I've been trying to break that down. I made a skit on it. Oh, there's a lot. But I like more detail than not enough. I'm glad that they're long. And so, yeah, Christ is a level, like if we're saying in Dr. Hawkins' terms, Christ would be about 1,000. It'd be like the top of the scale. But you would realize that you are I am, which means you are I. That's why all of us call ourselves I. And that the fundamental quality of you is I am, meaning you exist. It's not you think, therefore you are. It's actually you are, therefore you think. Because if you didn't exist, you couldn't think. So I always thought that was kind of stupid to think, therefore I am. I'm like, wait, this is kind of backwards. I get what he's saying. But Christ is a level that I think we're going to see thousands of people reach here in the next 100 years. I think we're going to see a lot of people actually move back. I think what's happening now is part of the return of the Christ is going to be us exploring all these potentials for all this like external noise, which would be all the things that are spiritually possible. And I think that's what's been happening in the spiritual community for the last 10 years. Like there's really things that mind candy, as Dolores Cannon said about her own work. People are exploring this with mind candy, but there's going to need to be sustenance that's reached eventually. And that's why some people turn back to Christ. You see some people that are like into the things, and then they're like, no, Jesus is the way. And I think that's because they recognize that there's some truth in the Bible. But we need to look a little bit deeper. And I think that the return of Christ consciousness is going to be when people stop studying just one religion. It's when they start studying other religions too. And they start seeing what is the truth in Buddhism and the Bible. What is the truth in Taoism and the Bible? Taoism and Buddhism. You start to link them all together to see that they're all saying the same thing, instead of trying to say this path is the only path, or this path is the right path, and this one's the wrong one, even though it's working for someone else. It's that when we're able to recognize the truth that exists within all the different teachings, instead of saying mine's the right one, that's when we move from pride to courage, and that's when we're going to see that transition. And I think we're in an accelerated time period right now because of the internet. Just practical based on technology. The fact that I can go on the internet and research 16 different translations of the Tao and look at all of them, and basically most books, all the books that you need, you can get online. And so with that information being available, it makes sense that this might be one of the most important times in human history for our civilization, 100%, just based on the amount of information that's available. Because now that everybody can access all this information, floodgates are open for human consciousness, because the reserved knowledge of what is the potential for humanity is, if we're making the leap from logic to spiritual, that's what science and spirituality is doing. That's why I think that is leading the forefront. That's what's going to change humanity. When we have both of these come together. And it was clear that from the beginning, church didn't want them together. They didn't want science and spirituality together. Church was basically like, we'll handle God, you guys handle the universe. So I think that's a quote. I don't remember who that's by. But when we come together and we link not just through abstract, like ancient civilizations talk and like it's cool, and what's possible human potential talk, but also how are we more similar than not? And it's so simple because you have these like Gandhis, for example, that are saying these things a long time ago. And as you go further along the path, you start to see why they're saying it. Because the more we focus on our differences, the more we focus on specifics of why my path is right and yours is wrong, the longer it's going to take, because we're going to be fighting amongst each other. And that's what the system is designed for us to do, is to divide and conquer is what it's called. But really, it's a beautiful design, because if we can see it for what it is and then be like, oh, we see that, we get the game, let's transcend it, let's do this together and cooperate. Mutual cooperation in the animal kingdom actually is what ends up, in more times than not, if you look at evolutionary game theory, that's what ends up actually evolving, is the ones that are willing to cooperate as well, not just go for whatever they want to go for selfishly.
And we started with embodiment, and I'm having a feeling of wrapping it up with embodiment, because all of this knowledge and all these things that you've accumulated in your life, I know that for a time, while you're running the Patreon, you would send people on quests to help them alongside this journey, things that were very practical and grounded in the teachings. I would love, and this just occurred to me, and we've never really done anything like this on the podcast, is I'd love for you to send people on a couple quests to live these teachings for themselves, and live everything that we've laid out today, maybe accompanying it with a little resources, some books, but also what would be some of the quests that you would send people to experience this for themselves?
Put me on the spot. This is funny because Alan Watts said a psychically communicated message is never as interesting as a well thought out one. And
he said that
right now. Yes, he did. Alan Watts was not a fan of psychic stuff. And I think that right now it's like I don't have any that I have off the top of my dome. Not thinking about it too much, I would say this. One of the best quests I can give is to take something all the way. In a world that wants you to have your energy all over the place, here, look here. It's an attention world. To do one thing really well and try that, and then see if that's for you. So, for example, a quest could be, I'll give you the quest that Wayne Dyer gave me. Wayne Dyer gave me the quest to read the Tao one verse a day, and to read only one verse, and to sit with that, and to contemplate it, and to not rush it, but to really see what's in that one, and go through the entire Tao one verse one day at a time. It's actually funny because Ram Dass said the same thing about the Bhagavad Gita. I was listening to Alan Watts's podcast, Be Here Now, and I heard Ram Dass say that himself. He read one day at a time, one verse. And so I think the truth is that the truth is simple. And so it might not be about more information. It might be about how much do you fully, really embody the simple things. And so a quest would be create yourself a morning routine and do it for 30 days straight, no matter what. No matter what your mind has to say. Because if you can do that, if you can do the thing that keeps humanity stuck, the biggest part of the game, probably. It's get past doing things that your mind doesn't want to do. If you can wire that into your brain, you become unstoppable. You become unfuckable, and you become unlimited because you're no longer stuck in what the past self wants. You actually can do what you truly want to do, the soul wants to do. And I think when we see teachings in science of this, like Dr. Joe, there's a reason why he does so well. And it's because he's figured out that there is some power that exists within you that if you understood, you would laugh at all the stuff that you've been struggling through, because in an instant you could realize and transcend it. But the game is to play the poor little me game again. That's another Elon Musk quote. The poor little me game. And so I guess those 3 quests, that would probably be enough. The third one being to take inventory of your life and ask yourself, where am I playing the victim? And to really, truly let that go in every area. Because wherever you're the victim, you don't have any power. And so you can only take your power back when you realize the power you have in this moment to create a new way of seeing what happened in the past. And when you get your energy out of the past and you don't get too caught in the future of different timelines, that's why I say you feel the feeling, but then you come back to the present moment, because it isn't about the specifics, because that same intelligence can organize something probably way better than you can imagine. Present moment. So bring yourself here with all that energy. Then you actually have enough energy to create. Then you're not feeling lethargic. Then you're not feeling like distracting yourself, because all aspects of you are on the same page. That's the quest. Get all aspects of you on the same page. You do that by getting out of victim mentality. You do that by understanding these spiritual truths. And like I said, do them one at a time, I think, is the best. Or to really commit to something. Because that's when you actually develop change. Because you either figure out if it's for you or not. And right now we're in a crisis of people who aren't committed to anything. So that would be and to leave it on a positive note, commit to something and watch what happens, because you'll see that you have much more potential than you ever knew, but potential doesn't matter if you don't actualize it. And so embodiment is the name of this game, to actually do beyond the mind, to enter the right hemisphere of the brain, to meditate, to get beyond thought, to get beyond the symbols, and to enter reality. There it is.
Powerful riff, brother. And I really hope people will nail that down and carry out those quests. Not to put you on the spotlight again, but you're already shining, so you're good. You're good. We end every podcast with a segment called the Final Trio, which are rapid fire questions you can answer in any way that you want. But before that, where would you send people to connect with you, with your work, any upcoming projects that you'd like to share with us? Drop anything that you would want so people can find you easier and connect with your beautiful work and content.
Nice. All right. Well, you can find me, Nick Zei, my name, and nick.zei on most socials. You can put my link. I'll send you my link tree. Just put my link tree in the show notes, and you can find everything that I got going on there. So, yeah, check it out if you like what I'm doing. I have a feeling, I don't know when this episode is going to come out, probably a minute, but I have a feeling I'm going to start doing many more breakdowns of the Bible and the symbolism of it. I feel like that's what's really needed as I start to evolve myself. So that's something that I'm moving into. So. Yeah, but science, spirituality, kind of linking it all together. I'm just trying to find the truth, man. I'm trying to figure it out. And I'm trying to help other people to figure it out and live a life where they're actually genuinely happy, or they feel connected. They feel some sort of wholeness. That's what I'm here to do. So, yeah. But yeah, your questions.
Awesome, brother. You're doing a great job. The final trio, the first 2 are personalized to the guests, and the last we ask at the end of every show. The first one is, what are the most important game expansion packs that you've picked up in this video game?
Man's coming up with terms I've never. Game expansion packs. What do you mean by that?
I heard you say. I heard you say that once. I looked it up. I looked it up, and an expansion pack, from my understanding in a video game, is like when you acquire something in the game that helps you level up. So in a simpler question, we could say, what's the most important thing you've picked up in this game to level up?
Okay. I get what you're saying. In the connotation of this conversation, I was using expansion pack in terms of like Burning Crusade comes out for World of Warcraft. So there's a new expansion. There's new things to do because the game is evolving. So that's what I mean with an expansion pack. So yeah, the things that I've picked up, how would I even word that in a game sense? You could say loot, or you could say, what rewards have I gotten from the quests I've completed?
Mm-hmm. I like that one.
That I feel like are valuable.
I like that one.
Yeah. It would be... There's many voices that seem to happen in your head, and there seems to be one or two that are recognizable. The first thing to do, the first quest that I feel like was super helpful for me, was to see that those voices in my head are not me. And so if you can create a sense of separation from the thing that you think is you, that's why people say so you've heard this thing about NPCs, and some people don't have internal dialogue, right? That's what some people say. That's like their justification that there are NPCs in the world. But it's only because they can't recognize that their internal dialogue is not them. So they're like, we don't have internal dialogue, but it's really because they can't see their ego. They think they are their ego. That's what I'm trying to say. So to realize that there's a constant voice that's constantly trying to convince you to do things, but it ain't that serious. And that it's like a chihuahua that's barking and it's just pissed at you, but it can't do anything to you. It's all talk. Literally, it's all talk, because that's all it is. It's like there's a Jarvis in your head, an AI in your head that wants to convince you to survive because this is what it thinks survival is. So to get your nervous system regulated is a quest that is necessary. Because if you're consistently stuck in this place where you think you need to fight, or you're consistently feeling like fighting or flighting or freezing, which is what I think a lot of depression actually is. It's just dysregulated nervous systems. When you can regulate that using the breath, using technique, whether that's like a Kriya Yoga technique, whatever technique that calls to you, Qigong regulates that, then your body can actually relax and get into a state in which it can become coherent and resonant again with the environment, but also in a place where it feels harmonious. And I think a lot of sickness, I think a lot of, whether it's mental issues, stems from the body being out of place. And so embodied spirituality, let's come back to that for this question. The quest is to realize that the body matters. Like, just because it's spirituality doesn't mean you just don't do anything with the body. Eating correctly is part of spirituality. That's embodied. You know, not going out and just destroying your body because you know you're intellectualizing these spiritual truths. That's a huge key for me. Every time that I am actually on point with my diet, I'm on point getting sunlight, getting into nature, the simple things, holy shit, I feel so much better. So it's like, it might not be in these far off intellectual concepts the answer to the quest that most people want, whether that's abundance or whether that's just to feel a sense of peace. Maybe it's in what you're doing in your daily life. And so getting your daily life solid before you try to understand all this mind candy, that's key. And I think there are a lot of people that do that well. And you mentioned Atomic Habits. That's a good one, right? I think Dr. Joe's done it well for a long time. I think Bruce Lipton has done it pretty well with his epigenetics, helping us to see that. And yeah, that's what I would say. There's a lot of Kriya Yoga's done it well for a long time. That's why it's still around. That's why Buddhism is still around after thousands of years. It's doing something. So the biggest quest that I've completed, though, I think is the quest that if all of humanity completed, we would be in a different position. And it would be this. Everyone's playing a different game in this reality. Like, they're on their own quests. They're on their own journey. And it's like, if we're a soul reincarnating, everyone's on their own stage of evolution. And the more compassion that we have for all those people, but yet we have the conviction to recognize truth and to call it out, I think that right there, if we can have both, if we can have compassion for when people are struggling, but not entertain delusion and say, no, this isn't true, when we believe something to not be true, to stand up when we're being called to speak, to make, for people that could be making Instagram videos, making TikTok videos, expressing yourself, not withholding it because you feel like there's some threshold you need to reach before you're qualified. No, you're qualified now. Your experience qualifies you. So you are enough now, is what I mean by that. So those are some keys, I'd say.
Love that, brother. The second one is, if the universe was a comedian, what would be the cosmic joke?
That's a good question. I'm gonna take a second on this one. What would be the cosmic joke? I would probably say death. Death would be the cosmic joke, because nothing ever really dies. It all is transformed. Look at the elements. Just look at nature. Nothing ever gets wasted. I think even non-existence is kind of the cosmic joke. Like, it just keeps going. It's the cycle. It's a cyclical nature. So the joke would be, I got to say this one more part of the joke. The joke would also probably be, most people are taking the poison thinking it's the antidote. And the joke is that the antidote is within you, but nobody wants to look within themselves.
Hey.
That's probably the joke. It's like, you were already that. You didn't have to do anything to get it. You didn't have to get anything. You didn't have to go down this, but you wanted to. You do it. But you are already what you're searching for, in the words of Muji, right?
Let's go. And yeah, even you said the cosmic joke being death. You don't use the term death. You say unalive.
Unalive, yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And also Walter Russell, I think he said refolded is what he called it.
Refolded.
Yeah. For those that know, he wrote the Universal One. Very interesting stuff. But yeah, the death is really an illusion. It's just the transformation. It's really change. It's really just change.
So for the final question, we call it the time capsule question, and we ask this to every single guest. Basically, it requires us to travel out into the future around 15 to 20 years. And I picked out those timelines because I believe that's going to be a moment in time in history where the younger generations of today are going to be stepping more into leadership positions around the world. And they're going to need a lot of guidance. They're going to need some wisdom from people who have already walked the path. And you are assigned a time capsule to your name. And you could leave behind a time capsule for these next generation of leaders for their own journey in awakening themselves and leading in or ushering in the new age that is emerging. So what would you put inside of the time capsule? It could be anything physical, or it could be non-physical, a teaching, a transmission, a vibration, a frequency. Really, all your imagination can fly right now. There's not a limited space to put into this time capsule, but what would you include for these leaders?
I think first, Steve Jobs was onto something. Autobiography of a Yogi he recommended on his deathbed. I would probably put Autobiography of a Yogi in there, just because it shows what's possible for humans. The stories of mystics and monks who can levitating saints, bilocate, astral project. I mean, basically force ghosts. It's just phenomenal. And what I would want to do would be to inspire, in the same way Steve Jobs, in my opinion, wanted to inspire people of what's possible for human potential through that book. So I would say that book, Time Capsule. I would probably put a copy, I don't know, maybe I'm just books right now. But the things that inspire me, right? So the Bhagavad Gita, I would put in there. I would put in the Yogananda commentary on Bhagavad Gita. That's one of the best books of all time. If I had to choose one book for everyone to read, it would be that book. But we're talking about specifically leaders. What else? I would put in there a message that would be, nobody ever figured it out fully. Don't look for somebody else to have figured it out and tell you how they did it. And to figure it out within yourself. Because I think people put their trust in other people to have completely nailed it 100%. And one of the things that I think we're going to move into is people who tap into their own unique truth, to how they view things, and to stop looking for people that aren't alive to give us answers. That meaning, it has two meanings. I think that these ancient traditions gave us a lot of wisdom, but it's not the answer for the exact way you should live in the 21st century. Maybe it was back then. Like, I'm not trying to disrespect, but in the same way with psychic stuff, you don't want to put it on someone else to figure it out for you. And I think that's why Nietzsche was so against other traditions trying to tell, but he was also scared of nihilism. That if Christianity got taken out, then is just going to be replaced by nihilism and people who don't believe in anything, atheism, which he said would be worse. In 20 years, become independent, go through the process of individuation, as Carl Jung called it, just really tapping into your unique self, and become self-dependent, meaning become, in 20 years especially, we might be headed to a time where being able to do your own gardening, be able to get your own water, to have the necessary skills to survive. They not only give you the ability to survive, but it's not even just about that. People don't realize there's a reason why Marcus Aurelius and these Greeks hunted and they fished and they actually did things out in the world, because you get gifts by learning skills. It's like that quest. It seems like, how does that transfer? If I just go shoot archery, how is that going to transfer into daily life? You'd be surprised. When doing things that people think are not spiritual actually benefit sometimes the most in terms of spirituality. You learn how to aim correctly, right? You got to learn how to pull it back directly in that same spot every time. Discipline. There's so much that can be learned from someone who not just seeks spirituality, but actually is within the world too. And I think in 20 years, that will be the evolution of humanity. Someone who can be in the world, who understands survival, but also understands these higher spiritual concepts and brings heaven and earth together into one. And when we have that on earth, that's when we will experience externally what is available right now internally. And so seek it within yourself first, and the rest will come. And know that it's there. You just have to realize it. It's not seeking it like I have to look forever. No, it's just you have to get quiet enough. It's like the absolute is literally absolute stillness. So if we can't control our mind, if we can't have a moment, of peace, that's the first step, is to see, why are we suffering? Alleviate your suffering. Look at these traditions and the wisdom, but come up with your own truth.
Powerful stuff, brother. Uncle Joe said one foot in the 5D and 1 foot in the 3D. And
let's go.
Highlighting that, you said getting gifts. You get gifts by learning skills. So, and we're in the age of information where learning is essential. Learning is easy. Learning is accessible. People are not paying for this conversation, right? So it's all out there. So I appreciate you for doing the work. I appreciate you for sharing so abundantly. And you're doing beautiful things, brother. It's been an honor to connect, and I'd love to do this again.
Thank you, man. It's been great. Very much enjoyed this. I talked a shit ton. Next time I come on, we'll go more back and forth. I just realized that. No I want to hear your wisdom. You know, you've got a lot, man. I really appreciate everything that you're doing in the world, and much respect to all the energy that goes into everything you do, because I know that this ain't easy. You know, I run my own podcast, and I know how much work goes into it. So I can only imagine, you know, the level you're operating on, how much goes into this. So I just want to take a moment to even recognize, you know, how much effort you put into not only this work, but just to serving humanity. It truly is inspiring to me. And so thank you for what you do too, bro. And I very much appreciated this conversation.
Thank you, man. We will continue it for sure. And I just appreciate seeding those seeds of a friendship, brother. So I'm here for you and here supporting your path.